10 seconds delay and I'm going to go live.
And I'll go mute.
Hello everybody, and thank you very much for joining us to tonight's webinar series, part of the Spring Festival 2021. Part of this festival, we are going to be offering you some further academic support, and this webinar is going to be delivered by Dr. Martin Sedgley from ELS International, our longtime partner. Today's webinar is going to be talking about the high-grade academic assignments, and he will be offering some really quick, short and snappy advice on how best to tackle these. So without further ado, Martin, over to you.
Thank you very much, Tatiana. That's great. And welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. I hope everyone can hear me okay. Tatiana, can you just confirm that you can hear me okay?
Yep, everything is working as it should.
Okay, just like to double check. So yeah, thanks everyone for joining tonight. I know you're probably spending a lot of time on your computers at the moment with having to study so much more online, so I know this is an extra thing for you then to add into all of that mix. So I hope that this will be as informative and useful as possible for you tonight. Our aim really is to help you understand some more about what tutors are looking for in your assignments, which I expect you're working on at the current time, maybe looking to deadlines over the next few weeks coming up. Perhaps you've got several different subjects that you're having to submit assignments for. So I know this can be a very busy time, and I'm grateful to Tatiana and Unite Students for inviting myself in through ELS International to provide some guidance for you over and above what I'm sure you're already getting from your tutors and from other support services at your particular university. We ran these webinars as a trial process before Easter in one of the Unite Students areas, and it seemed to be quite successful. So we thought we would take the opportunity while there's still time for it to be helpful for your, specifically for focusing on your assignment writing in this, this academic term now since Easter. So as Tatiana's mentioned, my background's in, I worked at a Northern university for 12 to 15 years, running the effective learning service there, and then recently set up my own business providing the same kind of services to students. And of course, the thing that we found most through these services is that students are sometimes unsure about what exactly it is that tutors are looking for. And this can present a lot of challenges when you're working hard, doing all the studies, trying to apply yourself in the best way as you can, and sometimes not necessarily quite hooking into in your writing just quite what the tutors are expecting to award high grades. So that's what we want to try and give some insight into tonight. So partly from myself, but also from graduates who have been very successful in their studies, hence the title of this series, Study Strategies of Highly Successful Students. So I wanted to let you have a chance to listen to a few of these students first of all, because it's important to recognise if you have been struggling yourself with any aspects of the writing, that most students experience confusion and uncertainty and demoralising stages, ups and downs with trying to put together your written, do the research and then put together the writing for your assignments. So I thought it would be useful for a start to listen to a few students. You can see their names down below. They've all done undergraduate studies and then actually gone on as well to do master's degrees, which they're sort of speaking from the experience of more in these videos, and achieved high class honours degree, high class degrees at both levels.
Hi, Martin. It looks like I'm not getting any sound coming from the presentation.
Oh, okay. Let me just pause this.
Apologies, everybody.
Okay.
Martin,
Yeah,
Martin is trying to sort out that.
Yeah, let me. I'm going to have to stop and come out and come back in again. I think. I guess this has just clicked off again. Let me just stop doing that.
That's all right. We'll let you try to sort this out. In the meanwhile, guys, for those of you who are currently attending, one thing that I didn't forget to mention at the start is if you're watching on your computers or on your iPads or your phones, right above at the top corner, you will be able to see there is 2 speech bubbles. One of them has a question mark. I have just posted over there some information. If you do have any questions that you would like to ask Martin, please type them in over there. I will do my best to then read out the question to Martin, who will be then able to answer it for you. Martin, do you want to give it a bash now? So yeah. Shall we give it a try?
Yes, can I try again, Tatiana? I've come in and come out and gone back in again. Think I've clicked the right.
No worries.
Just let me know if you can hear this.
Coming from a Nigerian background and from a Nigerian university, all that is expected of you is to write your exams.
Right.
And you're not expected to write long essays.
I come from a software engineering background. In engineering, we never had to write any assignment. We just had to do exams with really engineering questions.
It was over 10 years since I'd written an academic essay, and that presented challenges all of its own.
They're completely different because the nature of the work here is that they require you to be very critical.
The first semester, everything's really new on like the first assignments that you've submitted. It's the first go that you've had, and then based on the marks that you've got, you know, you get a rough idea of what you've done right in which subject, and you must take different approaches in different assignments that you take. That's when you get an idea, but then I don't think you can get it right first time, especially in your first semester, because it's a big jump from your A levels to university. It's quite different.
Coming from a Nigerian background.
Yeah, okay, so I just wanted you to hear from these kind of students in case, you know, I don't know what your experience is at the moment or has been during this academic year, which has been an extremely strange year, hasn't it, for everyone? And I'm sure it's brought extra challenges and difficulties for you, having to study remotely, perhaps, as you have been doing for a lot of time. And in a way, having less contact with tutors, I guess, has been tricky as well, and perhaps introduced even more barriers to that learning process. So I just want you to understand that, you know, to sort of normalize this really, and to say that whatever experience you're having, even at this late stage in the academic year, as you're approaching your final assignments, is likely to be one that's being shared by plenty of other students, many of whom are going on to become extremely successful, as I'm quite sure you can be as well. And I hope what we'll cover tonight will just give you some added impetus to make that kind of achievement. So some commentators will say that, you know, there's a certain kind of style of writing at academic level at university, on university degrees at least anyway, and here's a few of the typical characteristics that academics themselves will say typify that kind of writing that they're looking for. So first of all, it's often, I'm sure none of these will be new to you altogether, but perhaps just a helpful reminder to set the scene for our discussions tonight. There's this idea that academic writing needs to be objective, neutral. You know, these are the kind of descriptions that are often given to it, and I've used the word cautious here. So the language itself tends to be expressed in a way that's a little bit tentative or cautious, as I'm saying. So this kind of phraseology tends to be seen a lot in students' essays that tutors appreciate, where you're not maintaining that there's absolute proof of anything and there's a single truth here, but that, you know, many of the topics you'll be discussing are arguable, you know, debatable, and that's going to come up again and again in our presentation tonight. I think because you have a limited word count, as you'll know very well, and maybe already experiencing the constraints of that. Perhaps when you're drafting your assignments, you're discovering that you're creating initial word counts that may be quite well beyond the limits that you've been given, whether that's 2,000 or 3,000 words for an essay, for example. And you have to, if I can use sort of, you know, crude descriptions at times, sort of cram in as much information as you possibly can into that limited word count. So if you can make your language as concise as possible, really to the point, clear and to the point, then that's really helpful. Now, this is just a guideline, and please don't take this as an exact formula, but sometimes students find it helpful to have a you know, an idea of, so how long should my sentences be, how long should my paragraphs be. And I particularly put this in as a, you know, purely as a guide, rough guide, because, you know, I've reviewed thousands and thousands of students' essays over my years working in university, and if I were to say, you know, one of the three most common problems perhaps that recur again and again and again in students' essays is that overlong sentences, and to a lesser extent perhaps, but still problematic, is overlong paragraphs. And if you imagine, not that you might want to, but if you could put yourself in your tutor's shoes for just a moment and remember that it's not just your essay they're marking. You know, when you submit your essay on that deadline, they're going to have about, I don't know, what is it, maybe might only be 20, but it could be 100 or even 150 of these quite similar essays landing in their inbox or on the VLE, you know, and they go in and open up and they've got to review your, you know, assess yours, and then another one, and then another one. They need to get the meaning of your explanations as quickly and as easily as possible. I'm sorry to say that they won't keep going back over and rereading your writing. They have to get it immediately, really, in most sentences. So the more concise and clear that you can make those, the better. So an example of that, you know, I'm just picking examples just to try and bring it to life a little better. So this may not be your subject area, of course, but I think you can see here we've basically got two ideas really connected in one sentence. As you can see, I've mentioned in the previous concise criterion. So, you know, the topic is, well, the subject is emotional labour, and the two ideas are that that's beneficial to employees, first idea, because it increases their self-efficacy, second idea, and these two things are connected in a direct relationship. That's very typical of many academic sentences, and that's, you know, that's all you need to then produce a full stop and move on to the next sentence, which should follow logically just because of the nature of what's in the next sentence and the sentence after that. So don't overcomplicate your sentences, don't get them too convoluted, just stick to this fairly simple format. Some of you will see that's a subject verb object structure to the language. Some people will understand what I mean by that, but I don't want to get too bogged down in the grammar tonight. I just want to give some sort of general principles, really. And I think the other key word is be specific. Academics in their own research focus in great depth on quite precise variables and ideas and topics and issues, and they want you to do the same in your writing as well. So from the same subject matter as the previous example, here's another sentence. It's a bit longer this time, but I hope when you read that the meaning comes across to you. Even though you know there might be unfamiliar vocabulary like dissonance, for example, this is a kind of definition in a way, isn't it, of what that means. And again, it's these two ideas that there's a difference or a conflict, a tension between what someone feels inside and what their organisation might be expecting that person to express outwardly. This is the idea of emotional labour and the kind of problems it can cause for somebody, for example, cabin crew on an aircraft who have to smile pleasantly at everybody regardless of how insulting they might be to them, within limits, of course.
Martin?
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt, I've got a question for you.
Great, thanks, Rudy. Yeah.
How much paraphrasing should I do? Does quoting count towards word count?
Yes, okay. That's a great question, and we're going to come on and look at that in more detail on a subsequent slide or set of slides, but let me address it straight away partly as well. I'm going to be really emphasising throughout that section of this presentation that you have to paraphrase as much as possible, to a great extent. The tutors are looking for you to express many of the ideas in your essays in your own words, and the reason for that is that they can then see whether you understand what it is that you've been reading about, and you have to paraphrase, and of course you can only do that with your own language, because I'm going to be arguing that you need to explain ideas from your understanding of what you've read about, so not taking ideas directly from a text into a document, even if you change. Sometimes students think, oh, paraphrasing things, I'll just change a few bits of key vocabulary, but otherwise I'm kind of taking it straight across, I'll just find some synonyms for one or two nouns and verbs. It's not as simple as that. It's more sophisticated, it's more skillful than that, and this is not a skill that just comes overnight. If something that most students probably haven't had to do very much of at all before they come onto university courses, and I would always say that summarising and paraphrasing, this is the first stage of a model I'm going to show you for academic writing in a few slides time. These two ideas, they're easy to say, but actually much harder to do, and if students are struggling with that, it's entirely understandable. So if you're unsure about this and whether you're doing it well enough, we're going to look at some examples of paraphrased writing, at least as much as we can within the limitations of this fairly short webinar. And then I'm going to link, to show you some links to other documents where you can look at more examples in detail. But short answer eventually to the question is, you need to do a lot of paraphrasing, and direct quotes, as I think the second part of the question was about, truly is, you need to really limit the number of direct quotes. So I would, again, it's a very rough guideline, but you shouldn't be bringing in probably more than 2 or 3 direct quotes over a whole essay. Usually those for definitions, where you want to have to stick to the right wording because that's what the original author said is exactly what the definition should be. But otherwise, most of the ideas, you're trying to explain them through your understanding, which means in your language. So we'll come back to that point. And I think the question was also asking about, are direct quotes included in the word count? And yes, they are. And of course, that's one of the reasons the tutors don't like you using very many at all, because when you import, copy and paste, in effect, in any, a sentence or a phrase, or certainly if you were bringing in like a number of sentences consecutively, a short section of writing over 3 or 4 sentences, you're using a word count where the tutor doesn't know at all whether you understand what that means and how is it significant to your essay topic. So you've got to really work at developing your summarising and paraphrasing skills and we'll come and look at some examples in a few minutes' time. So thank you for that question. That's right at the heart really of what we'll be discussing in more depth tonight. Let's see where we go from here. So those were, four ideas, 4 principles of academic style, really, writing style. And I often present this kind of approach to writing in a model of 4 or 5 stages, which I'm going to show you in a minute or two. So you might think, well, that's it then, is it? Be cautious, concise, clear, specific, and that's going to be the key to getting a high grade assignment. Well, I think those ideas are about academic writing expression, but they're not the. Sorry, I've gone backwards there. Sorry. So just to remind you, that 4 ideas about academic writing expression, but actually I'm proposing they're not the cornerstone. They're not what lies really at the heart of what tutors are looking for. So again, I'm going to ask you to listen to another student, a Chinese student this time, who you can see came into UK education, a second year, third year of a undergraduate degree, very difficult transition, managed to still achieve a first class honours degree, went on and did an MSc and achieved distinction in Australia, and is now studying a PhD in China. So this is a pretty serious student, isn't it? And I just again like you to hear her describing her thoughts about this, because international students often say, oh, it's all about language, or this idea of written expression I've just been reviewing there through those 4 principles. So let's hear what Anchi says about that.
I think the language not is the most important thing. The idea is the important things. For example, you need to summarize your idea in the first sentence or first paragraph, or the last sentence or last paragraph, to make them clear to find what they are looking for. Language is not the important thing. If language is the most important thing, I cannot get the first honor degree. Read the tutor's questions as carefully as you can. Some people always understand the question in a wrong way. So if possible, you can ask the tutor, do you mean blah, 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 or try to use your language. Does you mean A can influence B, or does you mean I need to blah, 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 blah.
Just getting the information, making sure that you are answering the right question and not going off topic as well. And also the main tip is the lecturers and the tutors are there to help you. Just go and ask questions, like for example for assignments, go and ask the tutor in terms of more explanation. They'll give you pinpoints of points that are to be written under the title, because sometimes it's not really easy to form the points within the title and you don't know what kind of structure to have it.
Yeah, so
I think the language.
Sorry, I didn't. I have omitted to put the name of the second student in there, who's Farah, who's a home British student. So interesting contrast in one way, isn't it, between a Chinese student and a home student, and yet actually both saying the same thing. But I think we can say it's about moving beyond that idea of good essays just being about written expression. At the heart of it all, really, is the tutor is asking really at the beginning of when they're starting to mark your assignment. They're saying, does this student, all the time they're thinking, does this student understand the topic from the research that they've been doing, and have they applied that research to the specific question that I've asked them? Is everything in this assignment, every paragraph, is it targeting that question? So as those of you who may have attended the reading webinars that we've presented, including some last week, we looked at this idea then, and I'm you know, I don't hesitate at all to repeat the concept when I'm giving a different example here of another assignment question that was set by a tutor, and it looks quite simple really, but as both students were just telling us there in that last video, the most common mistake that tutors report again and again is that students stray outside the bounds, or as we might say, the context and purpose of this question. Tutors set the wording of their questions very carefully and deliberately, and they only want you to focus in on that, and then they want to know that you've read as much as possible about that topic and that you've understood it and you've been able to share that understanding with them in your language, as we keep saying, thanks to the first questioner we had tonight, and we'll be coming on to look at that idea of summarising and paraphrasing again in a moment. But you can't start any of that when you're doing your research, turning that reading into writing, unless you know exactly what it is that you're trying to write about. And that's given to you in the assignment question. And within a question, even one as short and seemingly simple as this, there's probably these three issues. There's a context to it, so everything has got to stay in there. So the context really there is, it's about the workplace. Now that's quite a big idea, but actually it does at least mean that everything you write about must have some relevance to this concept, you know, this key word of inclusivity. So obviously you need to understand very thoroughly what's meant by inclusivity, and how does that, how is that applied and enacted in the workplace. That's what it's about. But the writing purpose really in most questions is usually about some kind of relationship between two ideas. And in this case, as is often the case, it's about weighing up whether something is happening or not, or is it effective or is it not. And in this case, it's saying, okay, so inclusivity in workplace, it's talked about so much, isn't it, nowadays, as I'm sure all of us recognise in so many different ways, about all sorts of different types of people who've been marginalised in the past or even completely excluded from the workplace, and so many shifts and movements in that over the last 30 or 40 years, let's say. But is it really happening? That's what this question is asking, isn't it? Is it rhetoric? So is it, are employers just saying the right things but not actually really doing it in practice, you know, including people from all different kinds of backgrounds and situations, you know?
Martin, can I interrupt with two questions for you?
Great, that's what we want. Yeah, thank you, Trudy.
So, one question from Lauren Young. Is this PowerPoint on Learn?
Sorry, is it on?
On Learn? Learn?
I'm not sure what that means. If Tatiana's not there, I don't.
I'm here. I think I know it's not going to be on a Learn. However, the session is recorded, will be available later on. However, towards the end of the session, Lauren, Martin is going to put his email address down. So if you have any questions, he'll be more than happy to help you out with that. He also has some quick study guides that he will be able to share with you guys. So please, the last slide, I believe, Martin, is going to have your email address. Please do get in touch with him and he'll be able to send you these. There was another question. English is not my first language. I'm nervous that my assignment will not read right. How many times should the tutor read it? He don't have much time. He doesn't have much time.
Yeah. Yes, thanks. I've worked, so I'll just respond to the second question because Tatiana's covered the first. I'm glad that an international student has asked this for the benefit of all of us to consider tonight, because I've worked with, it's not an exaggeration to say I've worked with thousands of international students over my career in higher education, and actually I started at Bradford University coming in to teach international master students on their pre-sessional programs, so that the student who's asked the question may be familiar with that. You know, these English language for academic purposes classes that run before you start the actual studies, you know, usually over the summer, July and August, before the start of an academic year. So, you know, that's partly my background, teaching English as a foreign language. And then I came to specialise more and more in academic skills, including writing. And there's for many people, there's an overlap between those areas of you know, the two aspects of language and academic skills. It's very clear to me over all of those years and supporting so many international students that having English as a second language does not at all have to be a barrier to you achieving high marks, even at this level, you know. And I know it must seem like a really tough level to you at university, and it's easy to, you know, to look around at what other students are doing and assume that, you know, they're all writing better than you, and that, you know, it's partly because of your English language difficulties. So as you've heard from the Chinese student tonight earlier, Ansi, you know, she's a perfect example. You know, her English is not perfect. Certainly when I met her 3 or 4 years ago, and she was coming into the second year of an undergraduate degree, or the third year, I can't remember, but she came in at the later stage, and she had to really hit the ground running, therefore. You know, and she came out with a first class honours, because she learned she learned the right kind of approach to for these academic skills that we're going to look at in the next few slides. And like so many other international students, she came to realise that language is not the barrier. I know it might seem to you like it is like that, and it's easy for me to say, you might think, because I'm a, you know, experienced first language English speaker, you know, but I can only report to you from the experience of, as I said, literally thousands of international students who've gone on to become extremely successful, like Anshi. To put, you know, to try and sort of endorse that a bit more from a tutor's perspective, I can tell you about a research study that was done where academic tutors were given 8 different criteria against which they assessed students' assignments. So it's things like structure, referencing, analysis, these kind of things, you know, and language was one of those. English language was one of those 8 criteria, and they were asked to rank those criteria in order of importance for the marks that they gave in their assignment writing. And at the end of the research, it was established that English language was the 8th most important, the last or least important of those. And so the kind of skills that we're going to come and look at next, if you can just keep working and practicing and developing your skills at these kind of approaches, I'm going to move on. So these 4 ideas we're going to look at tonight. Well, we're going to look at the first 3 ideas in this 4-stage model. And I'm, you know, really adamant. I'm convinced now, after my experience, that the more that you can develop your skills in these areas, the more and more likely you will be to achieve high-grade writing, because it's your understanding of the subject material that's really important to the tutors, and for them to see that you've built that support, you've established that understanding by reading about the topic from a variety of different sources, different academic reference sources. That's where the bulk of your marks will come from. So, summarising and paraphrasing, we talked about, and I'm going to show you one or 2 examples of that in the next couple of slides. And then you've got to bring together. Synthesis means bringing together. You could say integrate, integration, a range of views from different authors on that same topic. And that will lead you into showing your understanding of the debate that exists around any or almost all topics in the academic world. This is, you know, this is what academics are all about, really, in their day-to-day lives, whether they're researching or teaching or studying themselves in some cases. They're continuously exploring new ideas about topics that are always moving, you know, always changing. New research is always contributing something more to it. It's a really fluid, dynamic process, academic study and research. And tutors expect you to show your understanding as up to date as you can be on key ideas within that debate, and not necessarily even coming to a definite conclusion about that. But as you explain more and more what different authors are saying, you can then start to build into that some interpretation from you about what that means for your assignment question. Because a lot of the, you know, textbooks and journal articles, sources, you know, different texts, government reports, whatever they are, they won't have been written with your particular essay question in mind, of course. So you've got to kind of interpret those ideas to your particular question in some way. And then often enough, part of what tutors might be looking for is this application idea where, you know, where you give examples from real life in whatever context your subject or discipline is, whether that's, you know, healthcare or management or engineering, whatever it is. It's going to help your explanations, isn't it, if you can illustrate those with examples that you can show how these theoretical ideas inform those situations or could explain them or might suggest recommendations for how they could be done better, you know, that kind of thing. Let's look at some examples to bring this up.
Martin, I've got another question for you.
This is good. I'm loving it. OK.
So I'm a first-year student and going to uni as an experience after high school. I actually have a problem keeping to word count. How do I stick to 1500 word count? Yes.
I mean, you might not like my first answer to this. Thank you for this question. Again, it's a very, very common experience. I don't want to even describe this as a problem necessarily. I think my main advice is to not worry about that, too much, because writers in any field, you know, whether it's novelists or journalists or academics, as we're now talking about, will tell you that they very often create more than they need at first because they're exploring and, you know, and brainstorming ideas and gathering those together. And in the course of that, you don't want to limit yourself too much by this, you know, really what is a quite restrictive boundary that tutors set for you. You know, these word counts for good students who are doing good research and turning that into interesting, informative writing. These word counts are restrictive. So what you need to be doing, rather than thinking, oh, I shouldn't be creating more than I've got word limits for eventually, is you need to be thinking about creating your writing fairly early on. And I'm going to talk about the idea of reading and writing in parallel. I know you're probably fairly well on in your academic term now, and so there won't be that much time left. But the more time you've got to create a draft that might be 20–30% longer than what you've eventually got to work with, and then you can edit it down and edit it down and edit it down over 2 or 3 iterations, quite possibly. That's actually a process involved in good writing. Most writers will tell you that from any different context. So that might not be what you're wanting to hear. You were hoping I had some quick fix to produce a 1500 word essay first time out, and I would say no, that's probably not going to happen in plenty of cases, and that's not really a problem. I'll come back to the reading and writing in parallel idea a bit further on as well. So I know, as you're saying, coming straight from school into university, you know, you're not going to know that, are you? Because this is all a new situation for you. So I would say give yourself some freedom within what seem to be very definite constraints that tutors set, and explore the process of being able to edit things down to that limit. Maybe one other idea to mention there is if you can share your essay with somebody else, so that you can just discuss the ideas in it, and they might be able to then say to you, that doesn't sound so relevant to me. You know, it can sometimes be useful to get another viewpoint on that as well, perhaps once you've got a draft put together. Let's break this down into some specific examples. So the limitations of this webinar mean that I can't show you the long texts that I've summarised ideas from and paraphrased from. We just, you know, it's just not the format where we can look at that. I'm going to show you some resources at the end of the workshop, as Tatiana mentioned, through my website that you can access, where you can look at examples of how students, starting from the original text, and you can see how they've distilled that down. And so I'm using this word distill, you know, to bring right down from a much longer text that you were reading originally into a shorter summary and paraphrasing in the process. So you can see the word count's been reduced to little less than a third of the original text. And when you find something that's really useful and you think is, you know, bang on, it's hitting the target of what your essay needs, I think you should be looking to do that, you know, reducing down to a quarter, at most a third of the original wording that you found it in. And you know, as I said at the beginning, summarising and paraphrasing, you know, they're refined, sophisticated academic skills that will take you, you know, potentially, if you're on an undergraduate degree like the last questioner in your first year, you might only become really comfortable with the way you're doing that by your second or even final year. You know, it's going to take you practice. You'll get better and better and better at it. To come back to the very first question we had at the beginning of this workshop, the student asked, you know, how much paraphrasing should I be doing? Is it okay to be using direct quotes? Are they included in the word count? Okay, well, here's an example of a short paragraph that's being created for inclusion in an essay, and we can see that most of this has been paraphrased, because the only words that are copied, as you might say, from the text are those that have been underlined. And I think you'll see that some of them you can't avoid because they're like names of people, then they're specific terms that have to be, you know, you have to include, otherwise you'll lose the topic altogether. So things like dementia, inclusive, you know, inclusive. Do you remember the question? This is for that question we looked at earlier about, you know, is inclusivity really happening in the workplace? And I think you can see from this paragraph, this is an argument, first of all, on the side of saying, no, it seems like inclusivity is just rhetoric. You know, it's just being paid lip service to by, well, would you believe it, an organisation as big an organisation as an NHS trust working in the health field themselves, and yet actually not positively valuing someone who's, you know, been an experienced team leader because of a medical diagnosis. You know, it's kind of ironic, isn't it? You might recognise. But yeah, very few words actually need to be copied, you know, but we have to use things like, so included in the inverted commas in the last sentence, you can see resourcefulness and denigrated category, because the writer, the student writer, has thought it's really important to show that language from the original text, otherwise I'm losing the sense of it altogether. But so much of the connecting language, you know, expressions and conjunctions and verbs and even nouns as well, have been able to be paraphrased into another form, you know. Okay, so there's an example. of the first stage of the model I showed you a minute ago, summarising and paraphrasing, you may remember that the second stage and third stage were I put debating and interpreting. So here's an example of those brought together, or synthesis, wasn't it? We said synthesis, debating and interpreting in stages 2 and 3. And here we've got several sentences now developed from 3 different texts. Can you see I've put at the bottom? Again, the word counts has been reduced now to 1/4 of the total that it's been taken from across those 3 different texts. But what the students done very well here is they've kind of restated what we've just seen in the first summary, in the first sentence, but found an extra support for that from a different source, Chaplin and Davidson, and then gone on to explain, the specific situation we heard about with Elizabeth in the second sentence, and then comes back to those first authors again to say, you know, this is a wider problem. And so I'm in sentence 3 now. Chaplin and Davidson see this as common for people with this kind of diagnosis. So it needs some kind of specialist support to ensure that you know, inclusivity is really happening. And then we get the debate occur, or students showing some understanding of that debate with this, you know, one of these wonderful words that says to the tutor, now I'm going to show you the other side of the argument, you know, you know, it is happening in practice, in some cases at least. So the student has found another source, different journal article, which has given some examples of companies hiring people with disabilities, and that's been a positive thing. And then we get this interpretation from the student in the final sentence. So when, as I mentioned right at the beginning, when you see this kind of cautious, you know, exploring kind of language, like this suggests that, that's a good, you know, it's like waving a flag to the tutor and saying, this is my voice coming through here now as the student writer. So it's typically coming, if you remember the Chinese student Anchi mentioned, you know, you can summarize things in your first sentence or your last sentence, even within paragraphs. So this is like a kind of summary interpretation of these different ideas in the paragraph, saying, yeah, there's problems, there's barriers because of management perceptions, but perhaps there are ways to overcome those by, you know, expanding the values, or, you know, the benefits that people with disabilities can bring in a different way, you know, that idea of diversity. So although you haven't seen the original text, I hope you can kind of follow the flow of that, and we've actually kind of got, you know, at least stages 2 and 3, if not 1 as well, already in there of that model that I was describing. Now I would hope, to come back to the questioner as an international student reading that, although some of the vocabulary is a bit tricky, you know, things like dementia diagnosis, perhaps, you know, I'm not seeing much else that's really, you know, apart from the keywords like inclusivity and disabilities. I reckon most international students, and hopefully you're seeing this yourself, that you could read that and understand it pretty quickly, that you could understand it pretty easily. So can you see, you know, the international student who asked that question a few minutes ago was saying, you know, I'm worried that tutors aren't going to keep rereading my writing to get the meaning. And I would say, yeah, that's the reality. They're not going to keep going back over and over again. But if you can express your ideas in ways here that are not complicated, this is not complicated writing. This is 2 at the most 3 ideas, most in a sentence. Most sentences have got just 2 kind of key concepts linked together in some way, like a cause and effect sort of approach in most of the sentences. I would argue that most international students are at university level are capable of writing, of creating this kind of writing. You know, you might not know all the vocabulary, but you write from your knowledge, your vocabulary, your language, express it simply and clearly and concisely. The tutor will get it. believe me, the tutor will get it if you follow those principles.
Martin, I have a question for you.
Right.
Would I connect those authors with the same opinion in one paragraph and then use opposing for another?
Yes, that's possible, isn't it? Of course, depending on, you know, the extent of the discussion that you want to present around the. So yeah, let's say very often, as we've got here, you've got two sides of the debate, aren't you, as the questioner's asking. And I'm not suggesting that you will always put both sides of that argument into one paragraph. And I think there are plenty of cases where it would benefit you to devote even 2 or 3 paragraphs, quite feasibly. I often see that, to presenting, the positive side of the argument, or the advantages, or whatever it has in this case. The problems that inclusivity isn't happening because of X, Y, and Z. And then you'll switch, further through the essay and present the other side. I'm less keen on that generally myself. I think it's good if you can have a particular point, like we've got here, about diversity not being valued by at least medical organisations for this kind of disability diagnosis. I think it's good to argue both sides of that, and then you might move on to talk about a different kind of inclusivity, something like age, ageism, where perhaps older employees are being sort of encouraged to move out of the workforce and that sort of thing, and present both sides of that. I think it's good to go through a series of topics and go back and forth across both sides, but that could easily happen, one paragraph on one and another paragraph on the next. You have to see how much material you've got, don't you, really, that you need to accommodate. All the time, keep thinking, does everything in this paragraph, every sentence in this paragraph, say something about that question? Do you remember the writing purpose? Is inclusivity happening or not in the workplace? And I think everything in this paragraph really locks onto that idea. That's the important thing. Make sure that's always happening. You're always coming back to your writing purpose, your essay title. Okay, thanks, Trudy, for those. Some great questions coming in tonight. So I just wanted you to hear, this is, you're taking my word for it at the moment, aren't you? It is actually my model that I've been showing you, this 4-stage model or 5-stage model of writing. It's something I developed through my time at university. But let's see how that corresponds or not with another 2 different students, both MSCs, graduates, recent graduates, came out MSc with distinction. Let's just hear what they say and see if you can hear some of the same kind of ideas I've been talking about. What's the start here? I
think you should use a lot of different sources. One which where your opinion is positive towards your subject, one is negative, and one more neutral. And then you can always add 1 or 2 other ones, but you need to have this extensive network of different sources in order to put weight on the subject at hand. Otherwise, when you only write what you think should be the outcome, then you will not succeed.
Sure. Well, my first tip, it will be always try to add your own words. It's correct that we rely on previous article, on literature, on references in order to analyze, in order to summarize our assignment, but try at the end of each section to add your own words, how you see things from your point of view, that it's related to what others have said, and as well as what is your topic around, because I think tutors will love to see such thing. Of course, they want something that is relied on research, of course, and figures and modules, but I think they will love to see some things you wrote your own words, including like the concluding remarks. This will be my tip, because this is one of the things I was thankful for.
I think you should use?
Okay. That's really all I wanted to say. Obviously, a limit to what we can cover tonight. I'll just pause in case we've got any more, any other questions coming in. No? Okay, we're okay. Shall I move on? But if there's anything else that's occurred to you, please keep on sending those in. Otherwise, then I just wanted to kind of refer you to some resources. Tatiana mentioned at the beginning that on my website, ELS International, there's a range of things. But first of all, I just mentioned that for those of you working on assignments, and if you wanted to get some feedback on that, then that's a big part of what I do through my work now, as I used to do at one of the universities. And this is the kind of type of information and comments that I give back on every paragraph of your writing, of a draft that you send in, if you have time to do that. I mean, I will say as well that, like the service that I ran at Bradford University, whichever university you're at, wherever it is in the UK, you'll have some kind of department, like a learning development unit, academic skills advice department, you know, that kind of thing. Some of these are in the library, some of them are in a different central part of the university. Some might even be sometimes within your own faculty department.
I have a question for you, Martin.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
If I'm sticking to the topic of looking at various views about the leadership in my assignment, how much does my opinion count?
Yeah, well, I think that's a good way of kind of capturing much of what we've been talking about, really. Interestingly, Anwar, the last lady in the last video, was started off by saying, didn't she, you know, put some things in your own words. But I think as she went on, you'll understand that what she was saying is that those ideas of you know, what you want to say from yourself is only emerging through the research that you've done into other authors' work. And that's crucial. You have to really, really get this point that tutors are saying, you know, often will say, I don't want your opinion. Now, that's a kind of, it's an overly simplistic way and sometimes rather misleading for students, because they think, well, where is my voice? You know, this is, you know, the perhaps more academic way of saying, where's the student voice then? You know, I'm expected to sort of distinguish myself, somehow make myself different, distinct from other students by bringing in this personal opinion. But what I can say that tutors predominantly are looking for, and I really mean in the vast majority of your writing through the essays or reports that you're producing, is that you show that your voice emerges from which sources you've selected and which ideas from those sources you've selected to include in this, as we've said, what is really quite a short essay. So you have to be highly, highly selective in what you're bringing in. So those are choices that no other student will necessarily make exactly quite those choices. But then you're summarising and paraphrasing and bringing those ideas together and showing that debate by comparing and contrasting these different views. And as we saw in that one paragraph, at the end of that paragraph, the student then gave one sentence where they sort of reflected, in a sense, they're saying, well, this is how I see that debate, you know, what the balance of that view is. And it might just be saying, you know, there's some problems, but there's some opportunities for how these could be addressed, as that example showed. So you may even just kind of sit on the fence to some degree with it. You don't have to come down one side or the other. But please believe me when I say that the tutors will be expecting the majority of your writing, especially in the earlier stages of your essay or right through the, you know, even into the main body of your essay, seeing a lot of evidence from research with plenty of citations, multiple citations in most paragraphs of writing, and then finally some interpretation of yours. And so the way that you've integrated all those ideas together that you've chosen and the way you've expressed them, and then done some interpretation of that, that creates a unique voice. Undoubtedly, your essay will not be the same as another essay. If it were, the tutor would be highly suspicious, so we don't want that, do we? So, you know, you're producing your own work, but it's not coming from something that you already thought before you went and started doing any research into this. The tutors are saying you're here at university to learn by reading about a lot of other people's research who study these things much more thoroughly and in depth than you've yet had the opportunity to do. So, you know, that's where you need to be coming from. Okay.
I've also got another question for you.
Yes, right.
How can we be critical in our essays?
Yeah, well, that's good. That's a useful prompt. I'll just flick forward to the next slide. I'll come back to that one. In next week's webinars, I'm going to develop what we've been looking at tonight directly into this idea of what constitutes then critical analysis. And it is going to be an extension of some of the ideas that we've talked about tonight, with particular examples of writing where I'll be showing you what we can say is critical analysis, and that tutors have said, yeah, that's the kind of thing we're looking for. That will enable you to build a convincing argument. So we're already running a bit over time tonight, so I just hope that encourages you, whoever asked that question, to come along next week, please, on whichever of the times suits you, either Tuesdays, as we're doing tonight at 5:30, or we're repeating each session then at 1 o'clock, like we'll be repeating this session tomorrow on Wednesdays, tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Yeah, so thank you for that. That kind of gives me a good plug for next week for the Unite students webinars. And one final resource to mention, Tatiana mentioned the ELS International website. There's some resources on there that you can access and have a look at. There's some other guides that I've published through the website, not expensive guides in the first place, and we also will provide a discount for you for Unite students. I've written a textbook fairly recently which covers a lot of these skills. It is in the area of the university I was working in, business and management. If you're on any of those courses, then maybe especially useful for you. But actually a lot of the skills we're talking about writing across many disciplines. The publishers of the book are offering a 25% discount as well on that. You just need to quote this this promotional code here when you can access that through my website onto the Macmillan website as well if you want to do that. Okay, so it's been great having so many questions coming in. Thank you very much. It's meant that we've pushed the time on a bit, but really appreciate those of you who've managed to stay through this and stay engaged. It's been one of the most interactive sessions that I've run tonight, and that's really rewarding for me. You know, shows that I'm offering something that's at least interesting you and you know, giving you some food for thought. And have a look at my website as well, and feel free to email me with any of the particular queries you've got. I don't mind at all responding to individual queries. That'll be fine. You know, there's a contact form on the website you can use to do that as well. Okay. Thank you very much. I think we should finish there unless we have anything else coming in. Trudy, no?
No more questions. Martin, as always, thank you very much. For those of you guys who are still online, thank you. We're hoping to see you again next week. Remember, when it comes to highly successful assignments, as somebody who works for Unite and as somebody who's currently going through her MBA, it's a fine balance, and the more you practice, the easier it gets. As you will be going through your journey as a student, it does get easier. These kind of quick webinars are actually a brilliant opportunity just kind of to wrap around things and just give you some specific golden nuggets and actually how to tackle these things. As I said, next week's assignment on critical analysis is going to give you some really short and snappy direct instruction of what you need to kind of stick to. As a student myself, as I said, I've used Martin and he checked a couple of my essays previously, and it has helped my word count, as in from really beating around the bush and kind of embellishing sentences, he said, no, just keep it simple, And as I said, these are kind of the things, the principles, just keep it simple. But yeah, we're going to be talking more about this kind of stuff next week, so please do jump on. Martin, thank you very much. Truly, thank you for hosting and producing this show, and we'll be seeing you all next week. Don't forget this same assignment we will also running tomorrow at 1 o'clock. So if you have any other of your friends or flatmates, please advise them to use a different QR code and then a link and join us tomorrow at 1. Otherwise, see you next week. Have a good one. Bye all.